He was sent to the farm as a punishment, a 30-day sentence of hard labor for a spoiled, entitled millionaire's son. But on the final day, when his father arrived to collect him, the boy made a declaration that shattered every expectation. 16-year-old Leo looked his father in the eye and refused to leave. This is the story of Leo Vance and a drastic intervention by his self-made father, real estate magnate Marcus Vance. It was a modern-day attempt at an age-old idea, using hard labor to reform a privileged soul. But what happens when the punishment becomes a gift, and the teacher isn't who anyone expected? To understand that final, shocking refusal, we have to go back to the beginning, to the sealed juvenile record, the totaled sports car, and the father's desperate, last-ditch plan. Marcus Vance built a $500 million empire from nothing. He believed in discipline, sweat, and the singular power of the individual. His son, Leo, was raised in the opposite world, a world of private jets, elite boarding schools, and the unshakable belief that money was a magic wand. By 16, Leo's rap sheet was a study in purchased consequences, a vandalism charge settled out of court, a drunk and disorderly incident swept under the rug, and a high-speed chase in a $200,000 McLaren that he wrapped around a palm tree. The car was totaled. Leo walked away without a scratch, and more importantly, without a legal record. His father's attorneys saw to that. But the McLaren was the breaking point. It wasn't the money. It was the cold, dismissive smirk Leo wore in the hospital lobby when Marcus arrived. There was no fear, no remorse, just the serene expectation that Dad's fixer would handle it. In that moment, Marcus saw a terrifying reflection. He hadn't built a son, he'd built a liability, a spoiled product of the very privilege he'd fought so hard to attain. Psychologists have a term for this, the entitlement paradox. Studies show that adolescents from high-income families with an average household income of $120,000 actually report higher rates of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse than any other socioeconomic group. They are often pushed toward external achievement while their internal character is neglected. Marcus, in his drive to provide everything he never had provided nothing of real value, no resilience, no gratitude, no understanding of where things come from. Facing this failure, Marcus didn't turn to a therapist, he turned to history. He became obsessed with stories of hard labor as a corrective force. He read about Kurt Hahn, the founder of Outward Bound, who believed character was forged through outdoor struggle. He learned of the A-Team program in 1965, where the US government tried to replace migrant farm workers with 18,000 high school students, a program that failed spectacularly when city kids quit en masse after 2 weeks of backbreaking work. The idea was simple, even crude: strip away the cushion and force a confrontation with reality. Marcus's fixer found the perfect location: Carter Family Farms, 200 acres of struggling soybean and dairy land 3 hours from the city. John Carter, the third-generation farmer, was drowning. Drought had ruined his last harvest, feed prices were soaring, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. When Marcus's lawyer offered him $50,000 cash to take a difficult teenager for 30 days of labor, John saw a humiliating but necessary lifeline. The deal was struck without Leo's knowledge. The confrontation happened in Marcus's penthouse study. Leo expected another lecture, another temporary grounding. Instead, his father laid out a one-way ticket. You're going to work on a farm. You'll get up at dawn, you'll do what you're told, and you'll live without a credit card, a phone, or your friends for 30 days. This isn't a negotiation. Leo laughed. He thought it was a bluff, another empty threat. Then he saw the 2 large men waiting by the elevator, not bodyguards, but handlers from a paid transitional service. Reality dawned. The screaming match that followed was epic, a cyclone of insults and shattered glass. But by midnight, Leo was in the back of a black SUV, speeding toward a life he could not imagine. He arrived at Carter Farms just after 5 a.m., the sky a dull gray. The air smelled of manure, damp earth, and something rotting. John Carter met him on the porch, a silent, broad-shouldered man with dirt under his fingernails. He pointed to a rusted trailer at the edge of a field. "That's yours, be in the north barn in 20 minutes. And then he walked away. Leo stood there, clutching a duffel bag of inappropriate designer clothes, utterly alone. The silence was absolute, and for the first time in his life, his father's money could not break it. The work was incomprehensible. That first day he was tasked with mucking out dairy stalls. The heat, the flies, the overwhelming stench, it was a sensory assault. He vomited twice. John Carter didn't yell, he just showed him how to hold the pitchfork, then walked away expecting it to be done. Leo's hands, soft from a life of screens, blistered and bled. Every muscle screamed. He was given a peanut butter sandwich for lunch and worked until the sun went down. That night, in the cramped, musty trailer, he sobbed with a raw, childlike helplessness he didn't know he could still feel. He was invisible. The farmhands, mostly migrant workers, ignored him. John Carter spoke only to give orders. The only person who seemed to register his existence was John's 15-year-old daughter, Mara. On the third morning, as Leo struggled to repair a barbed wire fence, she appeared beside him. She didn't offer help. She just watched him fumble with the pliers, his bloody fingers slipping. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "You're doing it wrong. You're wasting your time, and you're wasting the wire." She took the tools from his hands, demonstrated the quick, efficient twist, and handed them back. "The fence doesn't care who your daddy is, it just needs to hold." Then she walked off to tend to her own chores. This was the world Leo had entered, a world where value was measured in tasks completed, animals fed, fences mended, a world that was, by every metric, failing. The Carters were on the brink of losing everything. And Leo, the human embodiment of the careless wealth that seemed to rule the world, was now a part of that struggle. He was just another pair of inefficient, unwilling hands. But Mara's simple, unvarnished truth that the work itself was what mattered had planted a seed. He just didn't know it yet. Because on day 5, everything changed. A late spring storm rolled in, a violent tempest that threatened the Northfield's early soybean planting. John Carter mobilized everyone, shouting orders above the wind. Leo was told to help secure the tarps over the equipment. In the chaotic, driving rain, he tripped over a hose and slammed his head against the corner of a tractor. The world went white, then black. The last thing he saw was Mara's frightened face rushing toward him through the sheets of rain. Leo woke to the smell of antiseptic and hay. He was in the farmhouse, on a lumpy couch, a bandage wrapped around his forehead. The world swam into focus, and standing over him was John Carter, but Mara, holding a damp cloth and a look of stern concern. "You've got a concussion," she said, her voice matter of fact. "Dad's on the phone with your father's people. They want to medevac you out. He says no." That simple statement, asterisk he says no asterisk, landed with more force than the tractor. For the first time, someone with authority over him had refused the Vance family escape hatch. Leo was stuck. The doctor from the local clinic, who made farm calls, had ordered 48 hours of rest. No screens, no bright lights, minimal movement. So he was confined to the Carter farmhouse, a worn, creaking structure filled with the ghosts of better harvests. This forced stillness became his first real education. From the couch, he watched the machinery of survival up close. He saw John Carter at the kitchen table at 4 a.m., head in his hands, staring at spreadsheets that bled red ink. He heard the tense, hushed arguments about which bill to pay late. He witnessed Mara's routine, up before dawn to milk her personal heifer, Daisy, then off to school, then back to work until dark on homework and chores. There was no leisure, only prioritized labor. On the second afternoon, foggy and irritable, Leo muttered about the pointless drudgery of it all. Mara, who was shelling peas on the floor nearby, didn't look up. "You think this is drudgery? This is freedom." When he scoffed, she finally met his eyes. "Your dad can fire people with a text. A bank can call a loan because of a drought we didn't cause. Out here, the work is the thing. You do it right, you get a result you can see. The beans grow. The cow gives milk. It's honest. It's the one thing nobody can just take from us." It was a philosophy born of pure necessity, and it dismantled Leo's worldview brick by brick. His whole life, value had been abstract, a stock price, a social media following, a brand name. Here, value was a full grain bin, a healthy calf, a mended fence. It was tangible, and it was vanishing before their eyes. Mara, against her father's quiet skepticism, began assigning him sitting-down tasks, sorting seed packets, repairing harness leather, simple manual work that required focus. She taught him without condescension, as if teaching a child a basic life skill, which, in her view, she was. He learned the difference between a cultivar for dry soil and one for wet. He learned that the repair stitch he used on a horse's bridle was called a saddle stitch, and if done poorly, it could snap and cause a disaster. This was the hidden curriculum of the farm. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about competence. Studies on adolescent work experiences show that tasks with clear, tangible outcomes can significantly boost self-efficacy, the belief in one's own ability to handle challenges. For a boy who'd never truly accomplished anything on his own, each small, completed task was a silent revelation. Meanwhile, in the city, Marcus Vance monitored reports from a private investigator. He received photos of Leo looking miserable, covered in mud. He saw the medical bill for the concussion. This was the suffering he'd paid for, the humbling he believed was necessary. He congratulated himself on the brutal elegance of his solution. He didn't see the other photos, the ones of Leo, brow furrowed in concentration, learning to knot a rope from Mara. The investigators' reports noted increased interaction with the farmer's daughter and compliance with chores, which Marcus read as surrender, not transformation. Back on the farm, the crisis deepened. The bank's final notice arrived. John Carter had 30 days to make a payment he couldn't possibly generate. The weight of it sat in the house like a fourth person. Leo, now mobile again, but ordered to light duty, found himself alone with Mara in the barn after school. The silence was different now, charged with a shared understanding of impending doom. "What happens if you lose it?" Leo asked, gesturing to the land beyond the doors. Mara didn't cry, she just leaned against Daisy's stall. "We move, probably to town. Dad will work at the feed store, I'll work at the diner. This," she said, her voice tight, "this line of Carters on this land ends with me. All this history just gone because of a number in a computer somewhere." The resignation in her voice was worse than anger. That night in his trailer, Leo didn't feel pity. He felt a strange, burning outrage. It was illogical. This wasn't his problem. He could walk away and he counted 18 days. He'd go back to his life and this place would become a bad memory. But the image wouldn't leave him. Mara, who understood the true name of every plant on the property, who could birth a calf and fix a carburetor, serving pancakes to strangers in a town she despised. It felt like a cosmic waste. It felt wrong in a way his own vandalism never had. A reckless idea, the kind that used to get him into trouble, began to form. What if he could fix the number? He knew about money. He'd seen his father move it around like water. He had a hidden emergency debit card his mother had secretly slipped him with a $10,000 limit. It was meant for a hotel or a flight if he was truly desperate. He could give it to them. He could be the hero. The next morning, he found John Carter trying to jury-rig a broken pump. With a rush of self-importance, Leo laid out his proposal. He'd give them the card. They could make the bank payment. No strings attached. He expected gratitude, maybe even respect. John Carter turned off his wrench and looked at him with an expression of profound weariness. "So we'd be indebted to a Vance instead of the bank? That's not help, son. That's just changing the name on the collar. You don't buy your way out of a character lesson. The work is the lesson." The rejection was a more effective humiliation than any muck-filled stall. It forced Leo to see his generosity for what it was, another transaction, another use of privilege to avoid the harder path. Mara found him later, sulking by the fence line. "He's not mad at you," she said. "He's protecting the last thing he has left, the right to solve his own problems. You offering money is like offering to do my homework for me. It doesn't teach me anything. It just makes you feel better." For the first time, Leo asked a question not out of frustration, but genuine curiosity. So what would actually help? Mara looked out at the north field, where the storm had damaged the new planting. "The soil in that quadrant is too compacted. The seedlings are struggling. Dad knows it needs a specialty tiller attachment we can't afford to rent. It's a $5,000 problem, but if that field fails, it's a $50,000 problem come harvest." She shrugged, as if stating a simple equation. "We need a solution, not a donation." An idea, entirely new and unpracticed, sparked in Leo's mind. It wasn't about spending money. It was about using his specific, spoiled teenager skill set, relentless, obsessive online research. He'd spent years mastering video game wikis and sneaker release forums. What if he applied that same hyper-focused energy to compacted soil solutions? He asked John for permission to use the farm's ancient desktop computer in the office after chores. Suspicious, John agreed. Leo dove in. He ignored the easy, expensive answers. He searched for workarounds, farmer forums, agricultural extension studies from state universities. He learned about cover cropping, about deep-rooted plants that could naturally break up soil. He found a university trial using a specific mix of daikon, radish, and clover. It was labor-intensive, but the seeds were cheap. He presented his findings to John Carter not as a demand, but as a report. He had printouts, cost breakdowns, a timeline. John listened in silence, his eyes moving from the papers to Leo's earnest face. Finally, he grunted. The radish idea, it's old school, a lot of handwork to get the seed in right. He paused. You understand, if we try this, you're signing up for that handwork. It wasn't a thank you, it was a contract. Leo nodded. I understand. So began the great radish experiment. After his regular chores, Leo walked the damaged field with Mara, hand broadcasting the tiny seeds according to the complex pattern he drafted. It was tedious, backaching work under the sun, but it was their project. They argued over technique. They celebrated when the first green shoots broke through the hardpan. For Leo, it was the first real he'd ever been a part of that wasn't based on social status or family money. His father's investigator reported, subject is engaged in an unsanctioned agricultural project with the daughter. Morale appears improved. Marcus, misreading everything, was pleased. The hardship was working. The boy was learning responsibility. He marked his calendar for the 30th day, planning a grand retrieval, ready to welcome back a newly humbled son. He had no idea that on the farm, a different education was concluding. Leo wasn't just learning to work. He was learning to care about something beyond himself. He was learning that saving something, even a small patch of earth, required not a wallet, but sustained, shared effort. And he was learning to see Mara not as a simple farm girl, but as the most capable, grounded person he had ever met. On day 28, with 2 days left, the radish greens were a vibrant carpet in the north field. John Carter walked the rows with Leo, stooping to feel the soil. It's looser, he admitted, a monumental statement. That evening at dinner, a meal Leo was now invited to, John did something unprecedented. He looked at Leo and said, "You saved that field." Then he looked at his daughter. "Both of you." It was the proudest moment of Leo's life, and it instantly curdled into dread, because in 48 hours his father would arrive. He would be extracted from this world, returned to his old life, as if this were a summer camp ending. The thought filled him with a panic deeper than any he'd felt in the trailer on day one. He was no longer a prisoner serving a sentence. He was a participant who didn't want the game to end. That night, he confessed his fear to Mara under the stars. "What if I don't want to go back?" he whispered. She was quiet for a long time. "Then you have to tell him," she said. "But you should know, coming here as a punishment is one thing. Choosing to stay when it's hard and there's no money in it, that's a different thing entirely. That's a man's choice, and you'll have to make it while looking him in the eye." The final countdown had begun, but the battle lines had completely shifted. The conflict was no longer between a rebellious son and a punishing father. It was between two competing visions of a life, one of isolated wealth and one of connected struggle. Leo fell asleep in the trailer, not with the despair of a prisoner, but with the resolve of someone standing on a cliff's edge, about to jump. And at 9 a.m. on day 30, right on schedule, a cloud of dust appeared on the gravel road. A black luxury SUV, as out of place as a spaceship, rolled to a stop in front of the farmhouse. Marcus Vance stepped out, in a suit worth more than the tractor, ready to collect his redeemed son. He smoothed his tie, a confident smile on his face, completely unprepared for the war of wills that was about to begin. Marcus Vance took in the scene with the satisfaction of a sculptor inspecting his finished work. There was Leo, coming out of the barn, clothes stained, hair a mess. Perfect. The boy had been broken down, reshaped. He expected relief, maybe even gratitude on his son's face. What he saw instead was a calm, unsettling resolve. "Time to go, Leo. Get your things," Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the farmyard quiet. Leo didn't move. He stood his ground, his feet planted in the dirt. "I'm not going back, Dad." The words hung in the air, so illogical they seemed to bend the light. Marcus actually smiled, a tight, dismissive grin. "The month is up. The lesson is over. Get in the car. We'll talk about this on the way home." "I'm not going," Leo repeated, his voice firmer. "I'm staying here for the summer, maybe longer." Marcus's smile vanished. This wasn't rebellion, it was insanity. He glanced at John Carter, who was leaning against the porch post, arms crossed, a silent witness. Marcus's tone shifted from command to a cold corporate negotiation. "John, our agreement was for 30 days. It's concluded. I'll write you the final check. My son is coming with me." John Carter met his gaze, unmoved. "He's 16. He says he wants to stay. He's been doing a man's work. I reckon he can speak for himself." The ground was shifting under Marcus's feet. The hired hand, the bankrupt farmer, was refusing to comply. Marcus turned his full attention back to Leo, his voice dropping, laced with a threat only his son would recognize. "Leo, this isn't a game. You have responsibilities. School resumes in the fall. Your entire future is in the city. This is a field. It's over." "My future," Leo's calm finally cracked, but not into anger, into something clearer, sharper. "What future? The one where I go to some prep school I hate, to get into a college you picked, to take over a company I don't care about. That's your future, Dad, not mine. Here I built something. I saved a field. I learned how to fix things that are broken. What did I ever build at home?" It was a direct hit. Marcus flinched. He'd come expecting a subdued boy, maybe even one a little wiser. He hadn't prepared for a philosopher with dirt under his nails. He tried a new tactic, the one that always worked, the reality check. "You think this is real? This farm is failing, Leo. John is weeks from foreclosure. This isn't a life, it's a sinking ship. You want to go down with it out of some teenage romance with hardship." He saw Leo glance toward the farmhouse, where Mara stood in the doorway, listening. Marcus seized on it. "Is this about the girl?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think this is some kind of story? This isn't a movie, Leo. This is poverty. It's grinding, hopeless work. She doesn't need a rich boy playing peasant. She needs a way out." He'd intended to wound, to separate Leo from his new anchor, but he'd miscalculated catastrophically. Leo didn't look shamed. He looked at his father with a piercing disappointment that was far worse. "You don't see anything, do you? You look at Mara and you see a poor farm girl. She taught me more in a month than every tutor you ever hired. She knows more about real work, about loyalty, about what actually matters than anyone in your whole boardroom. And you're right, the farm is failing. So maybe instead of pulling me out, you could think about helping." There it was, the ask. Marcus nearly laughed. This was the masterstroke, a guilt-based pitch for a bailout. His smile returned, cold and triumphant. "Ah, I see, so this is about money after all. You want me to save the farm. That's the price for my son's return." Leo shook his head, a sad finality in the gesture. "No, that's the thing you still don't get. I'm not a hostage. I'm not negotiating. I'm telling you my decision. I'm staying because this is where I belong right now. But if you can't see that helping them is the right thing to do just because it's right, then you've learned less than I have." The public rejection in front of these strangers was an unprecedented humiliation. Marcus's corporate composure shattered. You belong in a $15 million home. You belong at the head of a table. You are a Vance. This is a charity case." He was shouting now, his face red, pointing a trembling finger at John Carter. "I bought this man's dignity for a month to teach you a lesson, and you want to stay and play house." The silence that followed was absolute and terrible. John Carter pushed himself off the porch post. His voice, when it came, was low and carried the weight of the land. "He's right about one thing, Mr. Vance. You did buy my dignity. You bought my desperation. You thought you were renting a lesson for your boy, but the lesson got away from you." He took a step forward. "Your son found something here you couldn't give him, a reason to get up in the morning that isn't a stock ticker. Now you can drag him out of here kicking and screaming. You've got the lawyers for it, but you won't be taking my worker. You'll be taking your enemy, and that's a choice you'll have to live with." It was a standoff, three wills locked in the dusty yard. Marcus, the force of wealth and paternal authority. John, the force of stubborn pride and hard truth. And Leo, the transformed variable in the middle. It was Mara who broke the stalemate. She walked out from the doorway, not toward Leo, but toward Marcus. She stopped a few feet away, looking up at the furious, suited man. She wasn't intimidated. "He's not staying for me," she said quietly. "He's staying for him, that field he saved. He cries when he talks about it, not because it's hard, but because it's his. You gave him everything and he owned nothing. Here he owns his work. That's what you paid for, even if you're too blind to see it as a profit." Her words, so stark and unexpected, knocked the wind out of Marcus's rage. He looked from her earnest face to his son's defiant one. For a fleeting second, he saw not a rebellious teenager, but a younger version of himself, the hungry, determined young man who'd built his first deal, who'd felt the pride of creating something from nothing. That man had been buried under decades of deals and acquisitions. He'd sent his son here to find humility, and instead, the boy had found the very thing Marcus had lost: purpose. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a cold, hollow confusion. He won every battle in his life by being the hardest, smartest, richest man in the room. None of those weapons worked here. He took a step back, his polished shoes scuffing the dirt. 2 weeks, he heard himself say, the words foreign. You have 2 more weeks. Then we will discuss this like reasonable people. It was a retreat, camouflaged as a compromise. He couldn't process a surrender. Without waiting for a reply, he turned and got back into the pristine SUV. The door closed with a solid thud, sealing him in silence. As the car pulled away, raising a plume of dust, he didn't look back. He stared straight ahead, his mind a riot of failed equations. The intervention had succeeded beyond his wildest fears. It had created a stranger. Back in the yard, Leo let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His knees felt weak. John Carter gave a single, slow nod, then turned and walked into the barn. The crisis was postponed, not resolved. But Marcus Vance was not a man who accepted defeat. On the long drive back to the city, the shock crystallized into a new, more dangerous strategy. If he couldn't retrieve his son by force, he would dismantle the attraction. He would prove, once and for all, that the farm was a dead end. He would acquire it. His lawyers found the details quickly. The bank holding Carter Farm's mortgage was a regional chain, one that had done business with Vance Developments. A series of calls were made. A proposal was drafted, not a foreclosure, but a buyout. Vance would purchase the delinquent loan from the bank at a premium, becoming the farm's new creditor. Then he would offer John Carter a choice: a generous cash buyout to walk away clean or face immediate, unforgiving foreclosure. It was corporate warfare applied to a 200-acre homestead. Marcus told himself it was a business decision. He was saving his son from a fantasy. He was even being charitable, offering John more money than the land was worth. He buried the part of him that knew it was an annihilation. The paperwork moved with ruthless efficiency. Within 5 days, the ownership of the debt transferred silently to a Vance Holdings subsidiary. A formal offer letter was drawn up. Marcus planned to deliver it himself, in person, with Leo present. He would frame it as a rescue. He would force Leo to watch as the practical reality of money dismantled his rustic dream. It was the ultimate lesson. In the end, money always wins. He scheduled the return for day 45. He would bring the paperwork, a final check, and an ultimatum. He believed he was walking in to end the standoff. He had no idea he was walking into a different kind of education entirely, one that would finally reveal what his expensive punishment had truly wrought, not in his son, but in himself. The final battle for Leo's future wasn't over. It was just moving to a battlefield Marcus thought he controlled completely: the balance sheet. 15 days later, Marcus Vance returned to Carter Farms. This time, he didn't come alone. A lawyer in a sedan followed his SUV. In his briefcase was not a plea, but a contract and a death sentence for the farm. He was certain that this, finally, would be the end of the fantasy. He found Leo not in the fields, but in the farmhouse kitchen, sitting at the table with John and Mara, poring over a catalog of used farm equipment. They were making a list, discussing priorities. The scene of domestic strategy stopped Marcus in the doorway. This was not a boy playing at farming. This was a young man engaged in the logistics of survival. "We need to talk, all of us," Marcus said, his voice cutting the collaborative quiet. He placed the leather-bound folder on the table. "I've made a business decision regarding this property." John Carter's face hardened. He knew what was in that folder before it was opened. The lawyer, a man named Green, laid out the terms with sterile clarity. Vance Holdings had acquired the farm's mortgage. The offer was straightforward: a cash buyout of $200,000, well above market value, for John to vacate the land within 60 days. The alternative was immediate foreclosure proceedings. There was no third option. The room was silent. Mara looked at her father, her eyes wide with a fear she'd never shown during storms or sick animals. This was a different kind of predator. John stared at the papers, his hands flat on the table, the calluses stark against the wood. He was cornered, and he knew it. Then Leo spoke. He didn't shout, he didn't plead. He simply turned to his father and asked a question. Why? Marcus, expecting fury, was thrown. Why? To save you from yourself, Leo. To show you that this sentimentality doesn't stand up to economic reality. This is a failing business. I'm offering John a soft landing. I'm offering you a way home without losing face. You're not offering me anything, Leo said, his voice terrifyingly steady. You're trying to buy my compliance by destroying the only thing I've ever cared about creating. You sent me here to learn the value of work. Well, I learned it. And now you're trying to prove that the work is worthless if it doesn't make your kind of money. You didn't learn a thing. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. I learned that my son is throwing away his birthright for a dirt patch. Do you have any idea what I've built for you? For me, Leo stood up, his chair scraping back. You built it for you, every single bit of it. The houses I never liked, the schools I hated, the future I never chose. This farm isn't a dirt patch. It's a home. It's a history. It's a family that works together instead of just living in the same house. And you want to bulldoze it to prove a point. Well, I won't let you. You won't let me? Marcus's laugh was harsh. You are a minor. You have no legal standing. You have no money. You have no power here. It was then that John Carter did something extraordinary. He reached out and put a hand on Leo's arm, a gesture of solidarity. Then he looked at Marcus. He's got more power than you know. He's got the power of an idea. John pushed the buyout papers back across the table. I'm not selling. You'll have to foreclose. Marcus was stunned. You're choosing ruin for what? For the right to fight, John said. And because he's right, this is my home, and it's become his. You can take the land, but you can't take that. Now I've got chores. John stood up and walked out, Mara following after one last, piercing look at Marcus. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Leo remained, facing his father across the gulf of the kitchen table. Marcus felt the victory turn to ash in his mouth. He had the legal power to crush this place, but in doing so, he would irrevocably lose his son. He saw it in Leo's eyes, a final, unbridgeable distance. For the first time, the cost of winning was clear, and it was too high. What do you want from me, Leo? The question came out as a whisper, stripped of all its authority. I want you to see it, Leo said, his own anger deflating into something like pity. Just for 1 hour, put away the lawyer, put away the checkbook, and let me show you what I've been doing. It was a ludicrous request. Marcus Vance's time was billed in thousands of dollars per hour, yet, driven by a desperate, sinking feeling, he nodded. He dismissed the confused lawyer, telling him to wait in the car. For the next hour, Leo gave his father the tour. Not the picturesque, postcard tour, but the real one. He showed him the North Field, now a thriving mix of radish greens and young soybeans, explaining how the cover crop was naturally aerating the soil. He showed him the irrigation line he and Mara had repaired, saving hundreds in plumbing costs. He introduced him to Daisy the heifer, explaining her milk yield and temperament. He spoke with a fluency and passion Marcus had never heard from him, not about sports cars or video games, but about soil pH and rotational grazing. Marcus followed in his suit, feeling more out of place than ever. He saw the tangible results of his son's labor. He saw the respect in the nods from the migrant workers as they passed. He saw the way Mara and Leo worked together, a silent, efficient team. He saw the pride in the straight lines of the repaired fences, in the clean stalls, in the healthy, growing crops. The final stop was the equipment shed. Leo pointed to the old tractor. That's the one I hit my head on. John taught me how to change its oil last week. It's not just a machine to him, it's a partner. You take care of it, it takes care of you. He turned to his father. That's what you sent me here to learn, isn't it? To take care of something, to be part of something bigger than myself. Well, I learned it. And now you're telling me the only thing that matters is the bottom line. Which lesson was the real one, Dad? Marcus had no answer. He stood in the dim shed, the smell of grease and diesel in the air, and felt the walls of his own worldview crack. He had spent a lifetime believing that currency was the only true measure of value. But here, in this struggling, vibrant place, he saw other currencies at work: sweat, ingenuity, care, legacy. and his son was investing in them. He thought of his own father, a mechanic who died with grease under his nails and little in the bank, but who was respected on his block for his honesty and skill. Marcus had spent decades running from that towards something he thought was better. He'd arrived at the pinnacle of success only to find it hollow and to see his son sprinting back toward the very values he'd discarded. "What happens to them if I foreclose?" Marcus asked, his voice hollow. "They'll move to town," Leo said. "John will work at the feed store until his back gives out. Mara will wait tables, and a piece of history, a way of life, will just end. And I'll go with them. I'll get my GED and work at the feed store too, because I gave my word I'd see this through." The conviction in his son's voice was unshakable. Marcus saw the man he had accidentally created, principled, loyal, and utterly free of the material fear that had driven Marcus himself. He had wanted to harden his son. Instead, he had given him a backbone. The walk back to the farmhouse was silent. The lawyer was packing by the car. Marcus stopped before they reached him. He looked at the farmhouse, at the land rolling out behind it, at his son standing tall in work boots. "Tell John to meet me at the county clerk's office tomorrow at 10 a.m., Marcus said, his voice a monotone. "Tell him to bring the existing mortgage paperwork." Leo's face fell. He thought it was the final blow, to sign the foreclosure. "No," Marcus said, the words tasting strange. "To sign a new deal, I'm restructuring the loan, 0% interest, payments based on a percentage of harvest profits with a 10-year term, and I'm investing $50,000 as a silent partner for infrastructure upgrades. The condition is that you stay on as a managing partner in training. You finish school online, but you work here. You learn the business, the real business." Leo stared, speechless. It was a complete reversal, a solution that wasn't a bailout but a partnership. It saved the farm without stripping its dignity. It gave Leo a future that was of his own making. Why was all Leo could manage? Marcus looked away toward the horizon. "Because you were right. I sent you here to learn about value, and I'm the one who needed the lesson." He met his son's eyes, and for the first time there was no mask of the tycoon, just a tired, uncertain man. "The value isn't in the land. It's in what you're willing to do for it, and for each other. I want to be part of that, if you'll let me." It was not an apology. It was something rarer, a course correction. Leo, after a long moment, nodded. He did hug his father. The gulf was still too wide for that, but he extended his hand. Marcus took it, and the handshake was firm, a new contract between them. The news, delivered to John Carter, was met with stunned silence, then a slow, deep nod of acceptance. He understood the difference between charity and an investment. This was the latter. Mara's smile, when she heard, was like the sun breaking through clouds. The paperwork was signed. The farm was saved. Leo stayed. He worked the fall harvest, feeling the profound satisfaction of reaping what he had literally helped sow. He video-called his father every week, giving him updates not on stock prices, but on crop yields and calf births. Marcus, in turn, started asking questions, learning about commodity prices and sustainable agriculture. A new, fragile bridge was being built. And here is the final, surprising detail. The following spring, Marcus Vance didn't just invest in Carter Farms. He used his venture capital fund to create a new arm focused on sustainable agriculture, partnering with land-grant universities. His first case study was the regenerative practices being pioneered on a certain 200-acre farm. He didn't do it for publicity. He did it because his son had shown him a market inefficiency he'd never considered: the value of resilience. The boy who was sent to the farm as a punishment became the catalyst for his father's redemption. The father who wanted to teach a lesson in humility received a masterclass in grace. And the farm, once a stage for a power struggle, became common ground, a living testament to the idea that sometimes the hardest ground to till is the human heart, but the harvest it yields is the only one that truly lasts. The story of Leo and Marcus Vance raises a profound and uncomfortable question. What is the true purpose of wealth, if not to insulate us from the very experiences that forge character? We began with a simple punishment, a parent's attempt to correct a spoiled son through forced labor. But the narrative that unfolded was far more complex. It became a story about two forms of education. One was intentional, the curriculum of dawn chores, blistered hands, and tangible results. The other was accidental, a father's education in his own blind spots, taught by the son he thought he was saving. This dynamic reflects a documented pattern. Psychologists note that adolescents from affluent backgrounds often report higher rates of anxiety and a lack of purpose, despite every material advantage. The intervention Marcus chose, exposure to hard manual work, echoes historical attempts, like the failed A-Team program of the 1960s or the principles of wilderness therapy, which seek to build resilience through struggle. The critical difference here was not the structure, but the teacher. It wasn't the punishing labor that reformed Leo. It was the authentic mentorship of a family fighting to preserve its legacy and the quiet wisdom of a girl who understood that true value is earned, not bestowed. Marcus Vance sent his son to the farm to learn humility. What he received was a lesson in hubris, his own. He discovered that the empire he built could easily become a gilded cage, and that the connections he valued most, to his son, to his own past, had withered from neglect. His final, graceful decision to invest rather than obliterate marked the moment he graduated from being a tycoon to becoming, however haltingly, a patriarch. He learned that real legacy isn't a balance sheet. It's the values you plant in the next generation and the dignity you leave intact in others. And Leo, he journeyed from entitlement to ownership, not ownership of property, but ownership of his effort, his choices, and his commitments. The research on adolescent work suggests that tasks with clear, tangible outcomes can forge a powerful sense of self-efficacy. Leo found that on a molecular level, he didn't just save a field, he saved a part of himself that his privileged life had never required him to use. His refusal to leave was not teenage rebellion. It was the first, authentic declaration of who he wanted to be. So what can we take from this? Perhaps that the miracles of transformation we seek for our children, for ourselves, rarely arrive in the packages we order. They come disguised in hardship, in inconvenient places, through unlikely teachers. They demand that we surrender our preconceived scripts. For Marcus, it meant letting go of a dynastic plan. For Leo, it meant letting go of effortless comfort. For both, it meant finding a common language in the unglamorous, essential work of nurturing growth. The farm, in the end, was more than a setting. It was the fertile ground where two lost souls took root. It proves that no matter how far we wander in pursuit of success, the path back to what matters often leads through simple, honest labor and the courage to meet another person's gaze across a divide, be it generational, socioeconomic, or simply human. The most fertile soil we can ever till remains the human heart. If this story of redemption and unexpected grace resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. For more documentaries that explore the profound transformations hidden in everyday life, subscribe and click the bell to join our community. Until next time.